I'm Ruth Medd from WOB Boards, and hello everyone. Here I am with the Zoom review of the Vacancies Board for the 18th of May 2023. So I hope you've all been keeping a good eye on the Vacancy Board while I've been away in my tour of Spain and looking at vineyards, etc. Great time was had by all, but now we're back in action. So this week I thought I'd have an overview of the Jobs Board, which is all about where the vacancies are by state, etc., etc. Then I'm going to pick one state and just give you a feel for the variety of opportunities that are traditionally available across state-based vacancy postings. And then I've got a couple of really interesting national vacancies for you. And then I'm going to make a mention of audit committees, which I did for the CPA Women in Leadership Program a week or so ago. So let's get started. Overview of the vacancies on offer. As at the 16th of May, I did a count of the vacancies on the Vacancies Board, and I discovered the ACT has 5 vacancies, New South Wales 22, Queensland 6, South Australia 12, Tasmania 7, Victoria top of the pops with 38, West Australia 4, New Zealand 5, and other, which is really an Australian-based director for an overseas company, 1, and national 19. So that's 119 postings that are available to you as at the 16th of May, and all up there's 217 vacancies. So that's quite a bit to choose from. And also I might note that I also looked at the percentage of vacancies that are paid, and at the time I did it, 72% of the vacancies on the Jobs Board were paid. Now, some are not paid a huge amount, you know, but that's okay. 15% were expenses and 13% were unpaid. So my message to you, if you're thinking of posting a vacancy on the WOB Jobs Board, is if you have an unpaid role, you need to be fairly careful as to how you phrase that. And if you're asking for a treasurer, as many are, just be a bit cognizant of the fact people like to know the extent and size of the task before they volunteer their services to be a treasurer. Us accountants, and I'm one of them, are in fairly short supply for unpaid roles, so you've got to work extra hard. And of course, we do have some small options for you, small fee options for you that will enable us to post and pump your vacancy, as the expression goes, or to give it a bit more prominence if that's what you think you might need. Okay, so that's the overview of the Jobs Board, widespread across all the states, and also lots of national vacancies if in fact you're in a sort of what I might call a lesser state, but in fact the lesser states are doing quite well at the present. I mean, South Australia with 12 vacancies is probably a record. And I was in Adelaide last week and had a great lunch with the colleagues there. So I thought today I might just mention 4 of the South Australian vacancies that are on the Jobs Board to give you an idea of what sorts of things are on offer. So I've got 30591, Adelaide Economic Development Agency, which is actually a part of the Adelaide City Council. They've got 3 vacancies, they're paid roles. They're looking for people who clearly can promote Adelaide as a destination. So they're looking for public relations, marketing, hospitality, tourism, research and development. So it would be a load of fun if that's the space you're in, and you'd get to meet some interesting people and you get to know what's happening in Adelaide vis-a-vis promoting it as a destination. Health-wise, we've got 30499, the Northern Adelaide Health and Wellbeing Partnership. Now this closes fairly soon and it's offering expenses, but this is an interesting not-for-profit model for providing community health services. And then we have 30514, which is the Adelaide Public Health Network, which in fact closes on the 26th of May, and this is a paid role. So they're looking for people who can manage health services essentially. And in this case, they're looking for governance, clinical governance, that is, health in its various forms, medicine and consumer affairs. So that's worth a look too. Now that's a paid role. And finally, I've selected 30531, the Energy and Water Ombudsman. And this is via a recruitment company called Stillwell. Closes on the 26th of May, and once again a paid role. Now this is one of those quasi regulatory bodies that's set up by essentially cooperation between industry sectors. So I imagine the people who are a member of that scheme, which I presume are the energy and water suppliers, have set up this scheme as a relatively low cost, hopefully, methodology for resolving complaints and disputes between customers and electricity, gas and water services. This is a really good entry board if you're looking to start your board career, might I suggest, if you come from a background of things like governance, coaching and mentoring, leadership roles, strategy and stakeholder engagement. And they're usually very interesting, and you get a really interesting perspective of what some of the issues are with service providers. So that's just 4 vacancies from South Australia, and they're to show the broadness of the things on offer. In addition to the ones I've mentioned, there are a number of unpaid roles for South Australia as well. So if you're from South Australia, jump onto the jobs board and have a look, and please consider putting in an application. You won't become a director if you don't put your hand up. So that's South Australia. Now, national vacancies, I've got 2 really interesting ones. First up, 30539 grain growers. This is a national body. It's paid, closes on the 31st of May, and it's got 3 vacancies. And they define the geographic spread for their board members as being in either the western or the southern regions. So there's 2 in the western regions, which is basically, you know, the more populous population in Australia, and 1 in the southern region. So what this organisation does, like many agri bodies, is enhances the profitability and sustainability of the Australian grain industry, aka Australian grain farmers. They're looking for stakeholder engagement, finance, governance, strategy, and agriculture and farming. Now, traditionally, people that get onto these sorts of agri boards know quite a lot about the agri function that the body follows. So you really do need to be an agri type to put your hand up for this one. But that comes in many forms. You may have been an agricultural researcher, for example. You may have been, you know, on the family farm and moved and become a top end of town accountant. So don't confine yourself to having to live on a farm, but you need to have a convincing argument that you will add value to this board. And they're usually fairly well contested, things like grain growers, because actually they pay quite well, for one thing. Plus they're really interesting and important to Australia. So think about that. And my second is 30513, ACCR. This is the Australian Centre for Corporate Responsibility. And this is a growing research and shareholder advocacy organisation. This organisation basically came out of Australian Ethical Investments, which I was on the board of for many years, and puts motions to AGMs to change the behaviour of corporate boards. That's broadly what they do, but they've obviously got lots more support than when we tried to start it off at Australian Ethical, and it's a large-ish organisation now. It's got 25 staff, and it's doing things not only about ethical investing, which was its sort of starting point, but they're now looking at all sorts of ESG type issues. So it's a very sort of interesting and increasingly important role as we transition to a different sort of carbon-based economy. They're looking for stakeholder engagement, governance law, public policy, and sustainability/ESG. The selection criteria are quite specific, and they are looking for fairly particular skills. But have a look and see if you fit the bill. I'm the principal contact person for this role. Closes on the 31st of May, if I remember rightly, and I can send you some additional material. But it's an interesting role. So, okay, that's 2 interesting national vacancies. And then my final comment is there are large numbers of audit committee vacancies on the jobs board. And I know we have large numbers of accountants and finance professionals in our network. So think about these as perhaps a starter board if you're looking for your first paid role, and it's something that probably your employer would be comfortable with you doing, perhaps, but be careful of conflicts. So there's 5 that I mentioned, and I'll just mention these briefly. The Wheddon Shire Council, the Queanbeyan Pellerang Regional Council, they're both in New South Wales. Also the Riverina Water. Now that's not a local council, that's something a little bit different. Toowong Shire Council, based in Victoria. And there are many more on the jobs board, and they get put up fairly regularly because there clearly is quite a demand for independent audit committee members for audit, risk and compliance committees. So have a think about those. So, okay, that's my look at the jobs board for the 18th of May. We've talked about the composition of the board, and there's lots of state-based vacancies, but also national vacancies. I've given you a feel for the vacancies that might comprise those that apply to a given state, and I use South Australia as the example. And I mentioned 2 relatively high profile, interesting vacancies, grain growers and ACCR. So I hope you enjoy this session. And my tip really for the day or for the month is please look at the vacancies, as I know you do, but have a go, put in an application. WOB's here to help if you need some assistance with doing that. And I wish you well and good hunting. And I'll be back in 2 or 3 weeks.